y'all, welcome and welcome back. In this video, we shift from defining feminist ethics to exploring the historical forces that shaped it. A historical perspective helps us understand why feminist critiques of ethics emerged in the first place and how they evolved over time. Philosophical ideas do not appear out of nowhere. They respond to the social and political environments in which people live. Feminist ethics grows from a long tradition of individuals and communities asking why certain voices are ignored and why certain experiences never make it into mainstream moral theory. When we examine the history of philosophy, a clear pattern emerges. The people who had the ability to publish, teach, debate, and influence ideas were typically those with the most access to education, economic stability, and political power. Their perspectives shaped what became recognized as universal ethics. But the moral experiences of other groups, laborers, racial and ethnic minorities, colonized peoples, the poor, and anyone denied public participation, were treated as morally irrelevant or philosophically uninteresting. Over centuries, these groups pushed back, insisting that their lived realities mattered and that ethical thought could not be complete without them. Their critiques laid the groundwork for what we now call feminist ethical reasoning. The waves model is often used to describe the historical development of feminist thought. This framework marks broad historical movements when people challenged existing structures of authority and argued that their experiences deserved recognition. A wave, in this sense, reflects a period during which long-ignored perspectives forced their way into the philosophical and political conversation. Although the model is imperfect and oversimplified, it helps us visualize how the struggle for moral recognition unfolded across time. The first wave of feminism emerged in the 19th century and focused primarily on legal and political rights, especially the right to vote. This was a period when women were denied basic civil status. Married women could not own property independently, could not enter into contracts, and were legally absorbed under their husbands through the system of coverture. The 1848 Seneca Falls Convention is often marked as the symbolic beginning of the first wave of feminism in the United States. Its declaration of sentiments demanded voting rights, educational access, and legal equality. Across the 19th and early 20th centuries, suffragists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, and others organized, marched, published, and protested. Although Mary Wollstonecraft predates the movement, her vindication of the rights of woman provided an early philosophical foundation by insisting that women's rational and moral capacities were equal to men's. Overall, the first wave concentrated on women's inclusion into public political life, laying crucial groundwork for later feminist critiques of social, moral, and cultural norms. The second wave of feminism began in the 1960s and expanded the focus beyond legal rights to the deeper structures of everyday life. The slogan, "The personal is political," captured the insight that private experiences, marriage roles, domestic labor, reproductive choices, workplace discrimination, were shaped by broader systems of power. Second-wave thinkers exposed how patriarchal norms operated inside the home, in sexual relationships, and in economic structures. Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex revealed how femininity was socially constructed rather than innate. Betty Friedan documented the dissatisfaction of suburban housewives. Radical feminists, like Shulamith Firestone, argued that gender oppression was rooted in biological and social reproduction. Meanwhile, early work by bell hooks emphasized that feminism must confront race and class alongside gender. Crucially for us, this era saw the emergence of feminist philosophy as an academic field, including foundational critiques of traditional ethical theories, critiques that later paved the way for the ethics of care. Second-wave feminism expanded the feminist lens from formal rights to the everyday structures shaping women's lives. Third wave feminism developed in the 1990s as a response to the limitations of the second wave, especially its tendency to treat women as a unified or monolithic category. Third wave thinkers emphasize diversity, fluidity, and individual identity. Intersectionality, first articulated by Kimberly Crenshaw, becomes a central concept. It showed that gender cannot be separated from race, class, sexuality, disability, immigration status, and other axes of identity. Third wave feminists also critiqued the essentialism of earlier movements, the assumption that there is a single shared women's experience or a universal feminine identity. Instead, this wave emphasized multiplicity and the ways identities overlap and shift. The third wave also expanded feminist thought into global and post-colonial contexts, asking how women's lives differ across cultures and how Western feminism sometimes imposed its own assumptions. This wave broadened the scope of feminist ethics and raised questions that care ethicists continue to engage in today. Fourth wave feminism is often identified with the 2010s and is shaped by digital communication, social media, and global interconnectedness. Online activism, hashtags, viral campaigns, and digital communities has enabled rapid mobilization around issues like sexual harassment, assault, and workplace discrimination. Movements like Me Too, Time's Up, and others have emerged from this context. This wave emphasizes inclusivity and recognizes that gender justice requires attention to diverse experiences, including those of transgender women, non-binary people, queer communities, and those with disabilities. Fourth wave feminists also highlight systemic and structural patterns of inequality, examining how institutions, economic systems, and cultural norms sustained gendered harm. The wave is deeply global, with activists connecting across borders to challenge exploitation, violence, and unequal distribution of care labor. In this wave, feminist ethics and the ethics of care intersect strongly. Both emphasize interdependence, structural critique, and the moral importance of dismantling systems that perpetuate vulnerability and harm. Each wave highlights something important about how moral authority is shaped. In early periods, the primary concern was basic recognition, asserting that those who had been excluded possessed moral insight worth hearing. Later periods expanded these critiques, exposing how social structures shaped not only who speaks, but what counts as ethical knowledge at all. As global, racial, and post-colonial perspectives gained visibility, earlier assumptions were challenged yet again. Thinkers from marginalized communities demanded that philosophy confront the realities of labor, survival, cultural difference, and historical injustice. These pressures revealed the limits of ethical theories built solely from the standpoint of the powerful. This historical development also exposes the limitations of the wave's framework itself. These waves tend to flatten complex histories, overlook global experiences, and center only on a narrow portion of the story. For instance, the intellectual contributions of Black feminists, indigenous scholars, Chicana thinkers, and post-colonial writers do not fit neatly into simple series of waves. Their work often emerged independently and addressed systems of power that traditional Western narratives ignored. Recognizing the limits of the wave's model helps us to see why feminist ethics requires constant revision and why no single narrative can fully capture the diversity of perspectives that shape moral life. Understanding this history matters for several reasons. First, it shows that ethical theory evolves in response to social change. As new voices gained access to education, publishing, and public life, they revealed blind spots in existing theories. Second, it helps explain why feminist ethics places such heavy emphasis on standpoint, context, and lived experience. These ideas did not arise abstractly. They emerged because real people confronted systems that had dismissed their moral insights. Third, the history demonstrates that the struggle for recognition is ongoing. Even today, the question of whose experience counts continues to shape moral and political debates. As we move through the lesson, keep in mind that the history of feminist thought is ultimately a history of expanding moral visibility. It is a record of people insisting that their experiences, often experiences shaped by labor, community, oppression, survival, or cultural identity, are part of the moral world, not outside of it. By tracing this development, we gain a clear understanding of why feminist ethics looks the way it does, and why it focuses on power, exclusion, and the social forces that shape moral understanding. Next, we'll turn from history to theory. We'll examine major types of feminist ethical frameworks and explore how different thinkers respond to the problems raised by this historical development. These theories will help us understand how feminist philosophers analyze moral experience, critique domination, and rethink the assumptions behind traditional ethics. Alright, y'all, that's all for now. If you're interested in more videos about philosophy and ethics, take a look at the videos posted on our channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.